feast on the blessings of Christmas. There's enough in that gospel reading to keep us here for hours. There's so much powerful language in that reading from John's gospel. Here's one thing I want to share with you. A little bit of background about John's gospel. Now, John was one of the 12 apostles, one of the followers of Jesus. And if you read through John's gospel, you encounter this sort of mysterious creature who's only referred to as the beloved disciple, And he's the one, if you remember the scene at the Last Supper, he's the one that's kind of leaning on Jesus as they're sharing that meal together. And he seems to have a very intimate association with Jesus. He's the only, in John's gospel, he's the only disciple that is there at the foot of the cross with the women. And what some scholars have thought, and it's an idea that captures my imagination, is that this disciple, this apostle John, is the only one of the 12, well, of the 11, that does not die a martyr's death. That John lives to be to a ripe old age, and as he does that, he gathers a group of disciples around himself, and he begins to tell them what he has seen and experienced as a result of his relationship to Jesus, who becomes quite obviously for John the Christ, God's chosen one. In fact, God in the flesh, which is what we celebrate today, right? And so maybe John's gospel is a recording of those things that John thought about, talked about, meditated on with his own circle of disciples, and they started to write it down. They said, this is good, and we want to hold on to this. And then after his death at some point, they put this all together into his gospel, which are his words, his eyewitness testimony to what he experienced about Jesus. But then either John himself or one of those circle of disciples writes this, what's called the prologue to the gospel, the introduction to the gospel. And they write these beautiful words, this wonderful poetry. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And you just get the feeling that they themselves have been transformed by John's witness, and they understand this very deep truth that they can't just spell out in a very rational way, but instead they have to use poetry to express this mystery, this wonder, this awe of what God is doing. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And of all those words that occur in these verses, the one that captures my attention over and over again, that just draws my heart and my mind back to it, is that phrase, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And I love the tenses of the verbs that they use. Notice that the author doesn't say the light shone in the darkness, the light used to shine in the darkness, but rather it's present tense. It's a present reality of our faith, of what God is up to. The light shines even now in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. I wonder if at that moment the poet who was writing these words was thinking about the crucifixion of Jesus and thought, well, that was the end, people believe. But here is the poet's affirmation, the believer's affirmation, the darkness did not overcome it. That was not the end. The light of God continues to shine in our world. And I like to sometimes play with those verbs in that second half of that phrase. The darkness did not overcome it, has not overcome it, cannot overcome it, will not overcome it. Because God must be God and have the first and the last word about the reality of this earth, about the reality of our existence. The light shines in the darkness. That's a present and a for all time affirmation. That in that baby born in Bethlehem, in that Christ raised from the dead on that Easter morning, the light continues to shine. And the question, I guess, for us is, as it was a revelation for those followers of John, as it was a revelation, a life-changing revelation for John himself, the question for us is, can we see the light still shining in the darkness? Can we capture some of that spirit of transformation? Can we see that different reality in this world? That light shining in the darkness. and affirm with our lives and ourselves and our testimony that the darkness did not overcome it. Not just not in the world at large, in God's overarching vision of things, but in our experience as well. In my life and in your life, the darkness does not have the last word. God always does. That word that became flesh is an affirmation on God's part, a reality on God's part, a new creation on God's part. That darkness does not win, but light finally fills everything and hopefully fills us. And so a story. Let me share a little story with you that was given to me recently that I thought was perhaps appropriate for us this morning. It's an Ethiopian folk tale. It was given to me by Claire Ravosa. It's called Which One is the Most Clever? Once long ago there was an old merchant and he had 3 sons. To which one shall I leave my fortune, he wondered. It must be to the son who is the most clever. But which one would that be? So he called his 3 sons together, and he said to them, here's some money. You must each take 1 coin to buy something that will fill this room. And those who can buy something to fill this room shall have my fortune. Oh, it's a big room, said the eldest son. 1 coin will not buy very much, said the second son. But the youngest son said nothing. The youngest son stood and thought, and then he smiled. Come, brothers, he said, let us go to the market. The eldest son brought straw with his coin, but 1 coin only bought a bit of straw. Even when he had spread it out as much as he could, the straw only covered a corner of the room. The second son bought sand with his coin, but 1 coin didn't really buy that much sand. Even when he had spread it out as much as he could, the sand covered only half of the floor in the room. What did you buy? The eldest son angrily asked the youngest son. You don't have any straw. Yeah, what did you buy? Said the second son, also in anger. You don't have any sand. I bought this, said the youngest son. A candle, cried his brothers. What good is a candle? Watch, he said, and he lit the candle, and all at once the room was filled from wall to wall and ceiling to floor, filled with light. Although you are the youngest, you are indeed the cleverest of my sons, the old merchant said. And that is how it came to pass that the old merchant left his fortune to his youngest son, because he was the one who could fill a room with light. The light shines in the darkness. The darkness did not overcome it. Our responsibility, our joy, really as we celebrate this Christmas and this Sunday together, this day beyond time, is to be those who can fill the room or allow our hearts to be filled or the life of another to be filled with light. A simple gesture of sharing that light. I was saying to Marianne last night as we had a few minutes to sit up after we got home after the late service, I said, I'm beginning to feel a change within myself about what's important to me at Christmas. I'm not so sure about the baby anymore. And by that I don't mean I'm not so sure about the baby Jesus being born in Bethlehem. I'm sure about those things, but it seems that in our Christmas carols and in our imagination and in our stories, we've kind of romanticized it almost out of reality. Oh, little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie. There was no room for them in the inn. Bethlehem must have been pure chaos at that time, but we'd like to see it still and quiet. Away in a manger, the poor baby Jesus, no crying he makes. Really? I thought he was just a normal baby. I know that the 2 babies I raised cried when they needed to, and I'm sure that Jesus lay in a manger on perhaps some prickly straw with animals around maybe cried because it smelled bad, it was uncomfortable, it was cold. His parents were doing the best they could for him, Mary and Joseph, doing the best they could for him, but still I'm sure he cried. I said, I'm feeling a transformation in my own thinking about Christmas, not to the birth of Jesus back then 2,000 years ago, but to the birth of Jesus now, potentially every single day, into our hearts, into our lives, into our consciousness, into our awareness. And then I found these words to a poem by Fred Pratt Green, a very famous hymn writer, which kind of echo my sentiments, that transition from Christmas 2,000 years ago to Christmas now. He writes, "The Word is born this very night. Hail Mary, full of grace. A hanging lantern sheds its light on Joseph's anxious face. The Word must come in human form in God's redemptive plan. A babe takes every heart by storm. But who will heed the man? The Word is born this very night, and humble is the place. The world is dark, but hope is bright, and sinners look for grace. The Word has come to end the war which Adam first began. Oh, bless the babe who sleeps on straw, and listen to the man." We're reminded that Jesus didn't come as a baby and stay as a baby, right? It wasn't like he was an eternal infant. But rather he grew up to say some very challenging things as God's Word made flesh. Words that obviously challenged the powers that be, who decided that he had to be put out of the way. It's not just the baby that inspires us, but it's the grown-up Jesus, the God made flesh who challenged our assumptions and understanding of things, and to help us to continue to be light bearers even when the darkness wants to crowd in and crowd out that light, to just hold up our candle. Perhaps the message of the baby is that God transforms this world one person at a time, one life at a time, one moment at a time. And even though God sees the great vision of that, God also pays attention to the details. You've probably heard that phrase, the devil is in the details. Well, God is right there too, in the details of your lives, seeking transformation and hope for you, so that the light might continue to shine. There's another short poem called Leaves in Solstice. Withered leaves panic before the knives of wind. They scurry directionless, longing for peace, burial in a swan's down of flurries. Dead blown, yet swirled into false life, their nature as leaves calls for a return to earth, to become bits and pieces of the kingdom from which new life will grow. Darkness drives down the sun, loosing night cold as blue metal. Together we beg the return of fire, and you hear, O Lord, suns slow revolve and thrones a little one on wood warmed with straw. Childbirth is risky. He comes as he goes in a rush of blood and water. In the night, with loaves and wine, we become the little one, blood brothers and water sisters of the Christ, each of us bits and pieces of the kingdom. And then one final reading that I'd like to share with you. Because as we continue to move forward in our celebration of Christmas and the events of Jesus' life, we remember that in the midst of this humble and difficult beginning, life gets a little more difficult for him as he is called out of his homeland, away from family, to become a refugee in Egypt to escape those who would take his life. And this is a reading that also caught my imagination. Christmas calls a community back to its origins by remembering Jesus' own beginnings as a human child. But more than a child, a prophet, a judgment on the world and its projects absent from God. What the congregation celebrates during this season is not primarily a birthday, but the beginning of a decisive new phase in that tempestuous history of God's hunger for human companions. The social concerns of the season are thus rooted in Jesus' proclamation, the kingdom of God has come near. And so we give up the patterns that oppress others, and we form a new human community that voluntarily embraces others. It's an adult Christmas that we encounter as God's people during this season. A risen Lord who invites sinful people to become the church. Christmas does not ask us to pretend that we were back in Bethlehem kneeling before a crib. It asks us to recognize that the wood of the crib became the wood of the cross. That the stones of the cave of the Nativity became the stone that moved away from the cave of Christ's grave to give way to a glorious Easter, to affirm once again the words of John. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. And so during these days, as God's people, we pray, Holy God, strong God, immortal God, give the peace of heaven to our earth, and open the door of your mercy to the beggars of your love. Amen.